if you want to call us an underdog, go ahead. We'll use that energy.
We're going to need to bring our best game, the best time of the year.
We're going to give it our all. See what happens.
He was moving and shooting. He scores! Mark Scheifele with a wrist shot. It's a power play goal. What a beauty play by Winnipeg.
Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets, hosted by Jets TV.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Ground Control, episode 107, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets. Joined here by Jets TV's Mitchell Clinton and 680 CJOB's Paul Edmonds. Guys, it's playoff time, and the topic of discussion, obviously, is goats.
Yes.
Did you expect that to be the hot button issue of May 17th?
Well, I saw the photo get posted, and I have to admit that story of Mark Scheifele becoming a goat owner in the last month and a half was one that eluded me. So, but now I am following the account that he posts on in regards to his animals and whatnot. But I just thought it was his quote about, and you can see this whole availability on winnipegjets.com if you want to watch it. The conversation starts at 6 minutes and 55 seconds, which is appropriate for Mark Scheifele, number 55. But the fact that the quote that he had about when they baa at you in the morning, and he's like, it's like they're saying dad. I was dying. Like, thankfully I was on mute for that, but I thought that was absolutely hilarious.
I especially like the part where he talked about bringing the goats, the pet goats, from some sort of a farm property that he has inside the city limits here, as being one of the pets that he has, or the pair of pets that he has with his significant other, and bringing them to the rink, and then them sort of doing their business wherever they felt it was okay to do their business, and then having the trainers not be very happy. I don't know that he made them clean it up or not. I would imagine that he had to, but you can't have goat without the other stuff. And when you have pets, you have to clean up after them, regardless of whether they're a cat, dog, or in this case, a pair of goats named Tom Brady and Tiger Woods.
Last note on the goat topic. Paul, you live on an acreage. Has goat ownership ever crossed your mind?
Not mine, but it has my wife's. She would like to get some animals that way. We have the people across the highway from us have a number of chickens that end up in our property every once in a while because they're free range chickens. But we have 3 dogs, and there has been some talk about maybe some goats or some ducks at some point. And maybe even a chicken coop, which I wouldn't be adverse to because we would produce the eggs, right? But
Yep.
Right now, where we are with my wife's home-based business and with our kids being 12, 14, and then just about 19, we still have a little ways to go with them before we can kind of turn our attention to things that we want to do, exclusively. So yes and no, the subject has come up about other animals and maybe some sort of livestock, Tyler. But we haven't really gone all in on that just yet. You got to get emotionally there before you can get financially there.
Well said. Well, we've reached this now point of the podcast. Well, let's talk about hockey. Mitchell, the Winnipeg Jets got wins in their final 2 games of the regular season. Obviously, the losing streak is what everybody's kind of talking about right now, but that's behind the Winnipeg Jets. Just your thoughts on how they were able to end the season as they transitioned into playoff mode.
Well, and Paul Morrissey said the Jets are likely be better for that skid that they went through. And I remember him partway through that losing streak just talking about how a lot of times you're going to start to establish these really good habits probably before the streak comes to an end. And I think that was exactly what we saw. I mean, they go in, they beat the Calgary Flames 4-0 to clinch their playoff spot, but, maybe didn't get the game that they were anticipating against the Flames because it wasn't as tight checking. You had all these bounces go your way, which is a great thing, but there was some rush chances and whatnot, things that you're probably not going to see in the postseason. So then they go and they lose a couple more games, but play played well in them, just didn't get the breaks or converted on some chances. And then, like you said, the last couple of games of the season, a big 5-0 win over the Vancouver Canucks and a 4-2 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs to close it out. The things that kind of stood out to me, number one, obviously the play of Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, combining for 15 points over the course of those 2 games. Blake Wheeler with 4 points against the Vancouver Canucks in what was Paul Stastny's 1,000th game. And I mean, that's the kind of performance that you want to see from those 3 players going into the postseason. Is you want them to be catching fire, because I mean, you look at Kyle Connor, he had gone 7 games without a goal. And then all of a sudden now he's got 4 goals in his last 3 games, and it looks like he can't miss when he's got the puck on his stick. And that's exactly how you want Kyle Connor feeling going into the postseason. If there was one thing that maybe didn't go their way, it was, game 56, where you have Paul Stastny go down on his first shift, and he doesn't finish the game, and Pierre-Luc Dubois doesn't finish the game. So that's obviously something we're keeping an eye on. Thankfully for the Jets, in their practice on Monday, Paul Stastny was a full participant. We haven't seen Pierre-Luc Dubois as of 2:21 p.m. Central Time on May 17th, whenever you're listening to this podcast. We haven't seen him yet. Fingers crossed that he makes an appearance soon. But obviously the big thing for the Jets is that you got the results that you were looking for in your final 2 games, and you can ride that a little bit going into this series against the Oilers.
Paul, we're through 2 practices here before the Jets turn the page and take on the Oilers on Wednesday. What are the goals for the team this week? Obviously on Monday, the power play and penalty kill were on full display at Bell MTS Place. Just how do you prepare for a series like this when you have this amount of time to practice?
Well, I think the amount of time to practice and the preparation time will be well served by the Winnipeg Jets, their coaching staff, to get what they want to get out of their team. So really, Tyler, it starts with kind of a couple of focus areas. And number one, the Sunday practice after the Saturday day off, following that last game in the victory against the Toronto Maple Leafs, was about defensive play. So you watched how they did their drills. There was a lot of 3-on-2s. There was a lot of regroups, and then there was 5v5 plays. So they really mixed that up with an idea and a concentration on how they wanted to play. And when I say that there's this defensive focus, it's defensive focus till you get the puck and then transition and back to speed, because you're just not wanting to go into a defensive shell. The Jets don't play that way. And certainly I think and I know that they struggled against the Oilers in the season series in the last handful of games for sure, but the Jets can play as fast as the Edmonton Oilers can play as well. There are dynamic, quick players on the Winnipeg Jets roster that will equal the Edmonton Oilers. So with the exception of the one player who is very elite in Connor McDavid and kind of that unicorn player, one of one, if you will, the Jets match up very well when it comes to that speed game. So they wanted to concentrate on what they wanted to do defensively and how they were going to try to handle the Edmonton Oilers. I think the number one thing when you talk about it, and Paul has mentioned this a few times, and the players by extension have as well, for a fact that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are going to get some opportunities offensively. They're just going to get those chances. They're that good. But what you're trying to do is limit the amount of chances that you give them, and also limit the amount of odd man rushes that you might give them. So you'd be okay with maybe a 3-on-2 or a 3-on-3 with Connor McDavid rushing the puck inside the zone, but not a 2-on-1, not a 3-on-1, something of that nature you want to stay away from. So it was all about on Sunday, the defensive play, and then transitioning once you got the puck to getting back to your speed game and your quickness. And then, as you mentioned, it was about specialty teams. The second day, it was about power play and penalty killing, equal in both situations when it comes to the postseason, even more so maybe the penalty killing from that standpoint, because Edmonton had the best power play in the league, and Winnipeg's wasn't that bad either. So if you can limit your opportunities that you're giving them on the power play, make sure that your penalty kill is good, you'll have a better chance to win. I would imagine you're going to see a bit of a hybrid between the first 2 practices and the final practice, but a lot more sort of selection toward the specialty teams before they get on the plane on Tuesday and go. That's what Paul sort of dictated was going to happen. Defensive play, specialty teams. So I think that that's kind of where they wanted to get better. And that's where they wanted to focus on. And I think when you watch the last two practices, that's exactly where that primary concentration has been for the Jets, on just a couple of areas. Kind of keep it simple, right? Focus on a couple of areas, get better at those two areas, refine them, those two or three, before you go into that series with Edmonton. You don't want to throw a whole lot at your team, get everybody confused. I think what's been done has been refined, and it's been good for this team going into that series starting on Wednesday.
Going into the final game of the season, Paul Maurice talked about the gentleman's agreement between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, both had their playoff spots locked up at that point. And yet the Winnipeg Jets lost Paul Stastny and Pierre-Luc Dubois, as Mitch alluded to earlier. Mitch, you gave an update on those two, but the two guys in yellow this week, Andrew Kopp and Nikolai Ehlers, all four of them, for that matter, Paul Maurice is optimistic that we'll see them in game one. Just what have you seen from Kopp and Ehlers this week so far?
A whole lot of yellow, basically. Yeah, every day I go to practice, and I'm hoping to see, one of them kind of ditch that jersey. Andrew Kopp really only missed, he missed one game this year, and it was the last game of the season. He took quite a hit in I believe it was the second game against the Vancouver Canucks from Grayovac. And that's like, I'm going over the footage, and that might be the only thing that I've seen. Now, he finished that game and whatnot and seemed to be fine. But he didn't practice after that. And then obviously didn't play in the 56th game of the year. And then he's been a non-contact ever since. So the one thing that I did take away from the practice on Monday, the special teams practice, is as much as, the Jets used a bunch of different options on power play unit 1 and power play unit 2, Andrew Kopp, despite the fact he was in a non-contact jersey, was part of every single rep that second unit did do. So I don't know if I'm personally reading too much into that, but that is something that I noted. As for Nikolai Ehlers, obviously he's been out for quite a while. I believe it was April 24th when he took the hit from Jake Muzzin against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he hasn't played since. Obviously a big part of what the Winnipeg Jets do, and Paul Maurice talked about it a little bit earlier, I believe it was on Sunday. Just, at 5-on-5, he's probably one of the most dynamic Winnipeg Jets. You talk zone entries, he's your guy, up among the team leaders in shots on goal. He was second on the team in points at the time of his injury. One of the three guys on the roster that had over 20 goals. You name it, Nikolai Ehlers pretty much does it for this team. So if you're able to get him back in the lineup, that would be an absolutely massive boost. And Paul and yourself, Tyler, talked about the speed of the Edmonton Oilers. The speed game is what Nikolai Ehlers does best. So if you can get him back in the lineup, that would be massive. Now, as for game one, at the time of the injury, head coach Paul Maurice said he was hopeful and optimistic. And then as soon as the playoff season, if you will, got underway, all he says is, I'm optimistic on all of them. And that's kind of where he left it at. I mentioned the participation that Andrew Kopp had on the power play. Nikolai Ehlers, in that same vein, only did one of the rotations with the second group. So perhaps he might be a little bit further away. Who knows? We'll see kind of how the next couple of days go. Obviously, Ehlers is a guy that has played through injury before, played on a leg fracture against the St. Louis Blues in Game 6. We all remember that. So toughness isn't an issue. It's whether, you can make the injury worse. So we'll see kind of how things transpire over the next couple of days. It was good to see Paul Stastny as a regular skater in practice on Monday. Still no Pierre-Luc Dubois, so we'll keep an eye out for him. Hopefully he's doing all right as the series gets underway, because that Jets depth at center, or even on the wing where Pierre-Luc Dubois was finishing the season, is strong and one of the assets for the Winnipeg Jets. So we'll see how all of this transpires. Obviously, this is not the time of year you want to have injuries, but at the same time, the playoffs are full of stories of people jumping into different spots and filling a role when they needed to, and coming up with big moments. So we'll see what happens.
Paul, quickly before we get into hearing from the players about the playoff series, Morrissey and DeMello, they've been paired together for these last few games as they closed out the regular season. It looks like they quite possibly could start together for game one. What have you seen from this pairing? I think coming into the season, this was a set of names that everybody thought was going to be beside each other going into the first game of the season, but that wasn't the case. And obviously the Winnipeg Jets went through what they went through, but now this is where they're at. So what have you seen from those two defensemen, and what can they bring to the table?
Well, this pairing starts, as you alluded to, last year with the 10 games that they played together during the regular season and then into the qualifying round against Calgary. So there was some history there, and I think that's why there was an impetus for everybody to believe that they were going to be paired together at the start of the year and they would just kind of pick up where they left off. Well, that didn't happen. But going back to last year, they were very good together. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And they have found that chemistry again of late. Now, you also remember that there was a baby involved at the start of the year, and Dylan DeMello, because of COVID, didn't have any support system other than he and his wife here and wanted to stay home. And that's very noble for sure. And I just think that it kind of got him off to a bit of a slower start. And that's why he was positioned down on the depth chart when it came to that third pairing for quite a while. But what we see with those two is there's always been that statement about a defenseman. What kind of defenseman are you? That's the question. Are you an offensive defenseman that can move the puck? And if you are, great, because then you have a value to the team. But if you're not, are you a defensive defenseman that is hard to play against below your goal line and in the slot area in front of your net? And if you're not the offensive defenseman, then you need to be that. And I guess in some ways, if you can be a little bit of both, then that's even better to help your chances of being in the lineup. Well, I think that one thing that we know about Josh Morrissey is that he's kind of gotten very good at being the defensive guy, and we want to see a little bit more from him on the offensive side. And he's running the power play now, and that's been kind of an opportunity for him to augment his game. But now you're trying to find somebody that he's comfortable with in getting up and jumping up in that play and activating. And I think that Dylan DeMello, while he doesn't do either one, be an offensive defenseman or be sort of that bruiser back there extremely well, he does both okay and to the point of being very well from the standpoint that he's a good mix there. So I think it allows Josh Morrissey to be comfortable in jumping up and being a little more or having a little bit more of an offensive flair. The other thing is Dylan DeMello can play a little bit more aggressive in his own zone, and he does move the puck very efficiently because he skates so well. He's one of the top 5 guys on the team when it comes to plus minus, even though he missed 6 games at the start of the year. He's a plus 10, that's second best on the Jets when it comes to defensemen. Only topped by Logan Stanley, who didn't play in all of the games, only 37 this year. So it's a really good fit, and it's interesting that they've gone back to it because I think that this is the appropriate time. I think these two have really been able to kind of have that symbiotic relationship to each other. DeMello is that calming presence, knowing that Josh Morrissey can jump up. DeMello is going to be there. But at the same time, you don't just necessarily concentrate on Josh Morrissey moving the puck because there is an efficiency to Dylan DeMello in moving the puck out of his own zone and activating as well. So I think that the other part of that is that you can handle a few more minutes if you're Dylan DeMello right now. He's only had an average of about 17 on the year. There's going to be more and harder minutes that he's going to have to play, and I think that he's capable of doing that. So Paul's gone back to something that he already knew he had last year, and down the stretch here, I think it's been a pairing that we've noticed, and that's why we're talking about it, Tyler, because they've done so well together, and it's been noticeable. It's been an affront, certainly, for the way the Jets have played on the back end and moving that puck and getting back to that quickness and that speed that we've talked about. It's been a really good pairing, and one that they're going to have to really rely on are the Winnipeg Jets when it comes to this series against the Edmonton Oilers starting on Wednesday, because between them and certainly the Pionk and Forbort pairing, those two are going to be front and center, those two pairings, when it comes to the top 2 lines of the Edmonton Oilers. But I think that this is something that goes back to last year. There's a comfortability. They talked about it, both players, in the last couple of days with each other, and the coaching staff certainly likes it. That's why they've gone back to it, and they've had some success in the last couple or 3 weeks since they've been paired together again.
All right, going to turn it over to a few Winnipeg Jets to continue on with this podcast. Obviously, it's been a busy week here at Bell MTS Place as the Jets get set for their series against the Edmonton Oilers. So we figured we'd let you listen in to what's been said so far. We'll start with Jets captain Blake Wheeler, followed up by Connor Hellebuck, Josh Morrissey, Dylan DeMello, Mark Scheifele, Paul Stastny, Adam Lowry, and of course, Jets head coach Paul Maurice. Enjoy.
Shop where the players shop. Jets Gear and TrueNorthShop.com are your authentic team stores. Make sure to stock up on all your favorite Winnipeg Jets and Manitoba Moose merchandise today. Visit one of the 5 Jets Gear locations or shop online at TrueNorthShop.com.
Hi, this is Neil Pionk, and you're listening to Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets.
I think that we need to, play our game. I think you're speaking about Connor, in particular, and obviously Leon too. Those are two pretty unique guys. So yeah, you have to be cognizant of when two of the best, if not the best, players in the league are on the ice at the same time. But at the end of the day, we can't play 5 guys in front of the net and not try to play hockey. You know what I mean? So. Yeah, there's no secret that they've had some success against us. We've had a tough time, but there are some areas we can definitely be better. And I mean, we're going to give it our all, see what happens. 7-game series and see how it shakes out.
Connor, what's the biggest thing you've taken from your past playoff experience that you can take into this series?
Well, when I think back, I just think of how easy energy was to come by, especially early in a series. You get those nerves going and get the emotions going, and everyone is buzzing. Everyone's bringing their A-plus game. So, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to play that kind of style of hockey. It's going to be grind, and it's going to be fast, and it's going to be fun.
On the role of maybe underdog in the eyes of many, do you cherish that role, Connor? The idea that maybe a lot of people are counting you guys out already? Does that motivate you, fuel you?
Absolutely. I try not to look at all that stuff, but if you want to call us an underdog, go ahead. We'll use that as energy. Any little advantage that we can get right now, we're going to take. That's what it takes in playoffs. Anything. I mean, the last puck, the last tip, the last block, every little play is going to matter.
Please, Josh, we know you enjoy and cherish the role of going up against the league's best. Could you just describe what it's going to be like to go up against Connor and Leon in a playoff environment?
Yeah, I think obviously they're 2 amazing players, and they have just phenomenal seasons, and I think it's something that they're a huge part of the Edmonton Oilers, and we're excited to have the opportunity to go in and try to play our best. I think we're going to need to bring our best game. We're focused on, as a group, as a team, trying to bring our best game. I think we made a lot of strides as a 5-man unit, and including the goaltender in our defensive game in the last few weeks. And so we're going to have to be on our best, at our best, in order to, play well against this team that is very dangerous off the rush. And I'm excited individually to get back to playoff hockey here, and it's the best time of the year.
Dylan, you've spent this season with a number of different partners and in different roles, but lately here you've been paired with Josh. What do you like about the 2 of you together? And if that's how it looks in game 1, what do you think the strengths of that pairing are?
Yeah, I think, our strengths for sure, I think, is our ability to move the puck quick and efficient. I think we do a good job of breaking the puck out and, moving the puck through the neutral zone for our forwards. And I think we've done a really good job since we've been back together here later half of the year, doing a really good job of activating the O zone and keeping pucks alive, but also getting some good looks and, walking the blue line and making good plays in that regard. So, it's always fun playing with Josh, and he elevates my game, and I feel real comfortable with him, and easy guy to read off, an amazing player, and in every way he can kind of do everything, and he does everything for our team. He's, our leader on the back end. So, I feel like he elevates my game, and, it's fun playing with him whenever we get the chance, and I feel like our game right now individually and collectively is in a real good spot. So, if we stay together, I think we're both looking forward.
Hey, Mark, you've always said you enjoy going up against the best players of the world. So does that mean you relish the opportunity to face McDavid in a playoff series?
Oh, for sure. Those guys, they motivate you to be better. They motivate you to work in your game even more. They motivate you to, be at your best every single game. So, then, you put the magnification of Stanley Cup playoffs on the line. It amplifies it even more. So, I'm definitely very excited for the opportunity and excited for the challenge. And, I know those guys are as well. So, it's fun to play against the best. Both those guys, prove day in and day out how, they're the best players in the world. And, you have to be at your best every single shift against them, or they're going to make you pay.
All this one for you, in your experience, going into the playoffs, is it better habit to stick with what got you here in terms of the power play? Or do you go the route of maybe being a little less predictable and trying to change things up undercover?
The more options, the better. And I think, like Scheifele was saying, I think on our team, we got 2 good units, which means we have a lot of good players. So if you kind of flip-flop different guys, if guys play different positions, we're comfortable in all those slots. So I think that's what's nice when you have options. And I think we're comfortable. If certain players are playing game 1 of doing 1 unit, and if guys come back during the series, or if certain guys get hurt during the series, we're comfortable switching it up. And we did during the regular season. And I think, especially for Scheifele's unit, I think, Wheels has been playing that half wall his whole career, so he's comfortable playing there. So if he has to play half wall, he has to play half wall. If he has to play goal line, he's comfortable there too. So I think it's us as players, I think it's not that big of a change, and it just gives a different look sometimes when things could get stagnant in a series.
And Adam, what kind of things do players like yourself and Mark have to do to at least limit Connor McDavid's chances?
Well, I think it starts with managing the puck, and that sometimes, for me, it'd be making a little safer play rather than maybe 50-50 play. It's you got to take away his speed, you got to take away his transition game, you got to get into his hands, get into his feet, and don't allow him to kind of open up the speed. He doesn't need a lot of space for that. It's a little different with the way Mark plays versus the way I play. I'm a little more physical. I'm going to try and be, kind of up and on him and, not allow that. Whereas, Scheifele, his chances are they're going to have the puck a little more. They're going to create some chances against Connor's line. So, it's about, if you get those transition chances, you're in a spot where you can recover, that you're not necessarily giving him or trading chances with him, where, that can be a real dangerous game.
Does it always come down in the playoffs to our goalie's better than their goalie? I mean, you can talk about McDavid and Draisaitl, but does it not always just come down to the 2 goaltenders at either end of the ice?
I think if it's even, the answer would be yes, right? There are some pretty impressive goalie where a goaltender absolutely carried a team where one guy was the absolute difference. There's some Stanley Cup champions that maybe their goaltender doesn't get mentioned because their team's so powerful up front. But in almost all of these playoff series that you see, well, let me answer this. I've always thought that the Conn Smythe trophy is kind of decided. The guy that's holding the Stanley Cup, that's wearing goalie pads, that's the Conn Smythe winner. If you win the Stanley Cup at some point, you have to have been the most important player for that team. That's a general theory. I mean, but I think it might hold pretty close to true. The goalie for the team that wins has to have been the best player over 2 months for that team to win.
Yeah, just wondering, Paul, what your thoughts are on that difference between the fans being in those buildings in the U.S. and here, and what kind of impact it will or will not have on the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair up here because we don't have to, nobody's going to have anybody in the building, but it makes a difference. It just in viewing the game, just the noise, right? It feels different. So it's so much more like, and I think I really do believe that the only maybe possible silver lining in all this is that the people, the players now have just a great appreciation for how important fans are to the experience, for the players especially. I think it makes a big difference, and hopefully it will be fair by the time a Canadian team gets to the conference final. There'll be a lot of people in the building.
Moving and shooting. He scores!
Tune in to Jets TV Live after every home game for highlights, analysis, and all the post-game comments live. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and the Winnipeg Jets mobile app.
All right, moving right along here. Obviously, the Winnipeg Jets taking on the Edmonton Oilers, as you already know. Mitch, I'm just going to ask you a simple question. What areas do the Jets need to excel in order to have success in this series?
Well, let me tell you. There's a number of different facets to it. Obviously, a lot of the things that they have been working on over the last, I would say 4 weeks in terms of rush chances against and rush defense has to be one of the biggest priorities. I mean, you look back at the 6-1 loss that the Jets had against the Oilers. Paul Maurice still says all 6 of those goals were rush chances. So you just cannot feed into that. As Paul said earlier in the pod, McDavid and Draisaitl, they're going to get their chances. That's just how good they are. You have to know that that's going to happen, and you have to be comfortable that that's going to happen, because you can't play, on your back foot playing defense the whole time, because that just gives them more space. Adam Lowry also talked about, how he defends Connor McDavid maybe a little bit differently than Mark Scheifele, but everyone just kind of has to play to their strengths. It's all about time and space. So that's obviously number one. Between the pipes is a big one. Mike Smith's had just a fantastic season with the Edmonton Oilers. Connor Hellebuck, obviously the reigning Vezina Trophy winner, 4 shutouts this year, 24 wins. That was in the league's top 5, faced the most shots, had the most saves. I mean, this is a guy that, come playoff time, he's got a lot of confidence in himself, and he should. And that confidence, permeates to the team. So if Connor Hellebuck can gain the edge in goal over Mike Smith, that's going to be important too. And then I think you also have to look at special teams. The Edmonton Oilers were one of, if not the only team this year that was able to put up multiple power play goals against the Jets in a single game. They did that 3 times. So Edmonton's power play is the top ranked in the National Hockey League through the regular season. You got to be able to be disciplined. And then for the Jets, who finished the year 2 for 30 on their power play over the last 10 or so games, you got to be able to get that going to be able to take advantage of your opportunities as well. So without, diving into every single little aspect, because we can go line by line by this one, it's rush defense, it's between the pipes, and it's special teams. I think at 5-on-5, the Jets have obviously have depth that can work for them. The Edmonton Oilers are a team that can, play quite well defensively and have shown that, but the Jets are a team that can also generate. So those are the things that I'm going to be watching for, starting right from puck drop in game 1.
Connor Hellebuck had an interesting quote after practice on Sunday when asked about the matchup between him and Mike Smith. And he said, you can call it that if you want, but it's really the Winnipeg Jets versus the Edmonton Oilers. And personally, that's how I've always thought about, the question, the goaltending matchup. Well, I mean, it's more of a duel, so to speak. Paul, I'll just get you to elaborate on this a little bit. Just what do you make of this duel between the two netminders? Obviously, you have one who's, obviously in the back end of his career, and then you have Connor Hellebuck, who's right in the prime of his career. It's just who bends and doesn't break type of thing.
Well, you also mentioned that being Connor Hellebuck, that if people wanted to characterize the Winnipeg Jets as being the underdog, that they would take it, right? That's what I kind of found interesting from Connor. I thought that he was very assured of himself yesterday, and that was in the first media availability on the Sunday that the Jets had leading up to the Wednesday start of this series. And he should. I mean, he had a pretty good year again this year, and I'll answer your question in a moment. I mean, he had 45 games that he played this year, and that was the most in the National Hockey League. 2,600 minutes that he played, most in the National Hockey League. He faced the most shots again this year in the National Hockey League. So he should be battle ready, not to mention the fact that while he is significantly younger than Mike Smith, and Smith is 39 years old, Connor Hellebuck has more playoff experience than Mike Smith. Can you believe that Mike Smith only has 25 postseason games under his belt? Certainly he's been a backup for a lot more, but that doesn't really resonate when you're in the middle of it and guys are taking shots at you. And he's had a long storied career for sure, has Mike Smith, and he had a real good run in the last 6 to 8 weeks with the Edmonton Oilers, and it's one of the reasons why they surpassed the Winnipeg Jets and kind of put a little bit of pressure on Toronto for top spot in the Scotia North Division toward the end. And while they were running to probably one of the hottest teams in the league near the end of the year, and that was goaltending, because at the start of the year they weren't getting any. Mike Smith is more than capable, certainly, of backstopping you and stealing a game. He's also quite capable, I think, of winning you a series. But his postseason past performance sheet would tell you that maybe there's still some question marks with Mike Smith, despite his elaborate career in the National Hockey League. And that Connor Hellebuyck in this instance might not be the underdog overall when it comes to the goaltending situation. And Connor does have some things to prove for sure. He's had some great moments in the playoffs. I think of the Minnesota series. I think of the Nashville series. But overall, whenever the Winnipeg Jets have been beaten in a series, there has been the other guy that has beaten him in that series. David Riddick last year in the qualifying round. It was Jordan Binnington the year before that. And then in the Western Conference Finals a few years back, it was Marc-Andre Fleury. So it's a matter of goaltending being the primary position in a playoff series. Paul Maurice has talked about this. The Conn Smythe winner, quote unquote, from the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets, should be the guy that's holding the Stanley Cup wearing goalie pads at the end of it. That's how important goaltending is in the postseason. And I like the matchup between these two guys. And yes, it's team versus team, but I'm going to be watching who is the goaltender that outperforms whom in this series. And whomever does is going to give their team a better chance of winning the series. And I just have a funny feeling that Connor Hellebuyck's time might be nigh for a little bit of a return to that 17-18 run that he and his team were so big and valued in when it came to getting to the Western Conference Final against Vegas. Not to say that Mike Smith might not have his games here as well. That's why if you're looking for predictions, I think this one's going to go very deep, and then it's a coin flip after that. But it will be a primary of importance for either one of these two goaltenders to backstop their team to wins and a series victory overall.
Before we wrap up this episode of Ground Control, just want to make one quick announcement. The Winnipeg Jets PR Twitter account announced today that the Jets have recalled the following players: Mikhail Burden, Eric Comrie, Dylan Sandberg, Marco Dano, David Gustafsson, Dominic Toninato, and Christian Vesalainen. Obviously, at the end of the regular season, the taxi squad gets eliminated, and these gentlemen will be part of the Black Aces, which is essentially the playoff version of the taxi squad. All right, the next time you'll hear from us will be next week after Game 4 of the series between the Winnipeg Jets and the Edmonton Oilers. Be sure, though, don't worry, the podcast game will continue. You can listen to Flyby, the official game day podcast of the Winnipeg Jets. That's available wherever you get your podcasts. That's Jamie Thomas and Paul Edmonds. They'll tee up every single game day and have all the news and notes as well. Thank you so much for listening to Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets. On behalf of myself, Tyler Esquivel, Jets TV's Mitchell Clinton, and 680 CJOB's Paul Edmonds, have yourself a great day.
This has been Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets, hosted by Jets TV. For Jets news, videos, and more, head to winnipegjets.com.